back to my channel. I'm filming 2 videos today, so you're getting the same outfit in both, and it's proving very hard for me to find somewhere light enough and clear enough for me to film. So we have this weird side table setup thing. Anyway, today's video is one I've been thinking about making for a while. It's my top 10 best beginnings, because not to sound too pretentious, but this year is a very significant year for me. I've left Japan, which was my home for 5 years. I've let go of a love that I was holding on to for 7 years, and sad though that is, it's also very freeing. So in general, this year is about new beginnings for me. I'm moving to Australia and I'm going traveling before that. So lots of changes happening, and this just seemed like an appropriate video to make. So I have my top 10 and I'm going to give them to you in ascending order. My number 10 choice is a book that's already quite popular on YouTube. It is The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. And I think we can all agree that a good opening needs to begin to introduce a character, give you a sense of place and a sense of the impending story. And this one does that in very few words. The first thing you find out when your dog learns to talk is that dogs don't got nothing much to say about anything. Need a poo, Todd? Shut up, Manchi. Poo, poo, Todd. I said shut it. And we already have a talking dog. My number 9 pick is Skellig by David Almond, a book and an author I don't hear anyone talk about on BookTube, but I recommend both. And Skellig in particular has really wonderful imagery. The figure of Skellig is very mysterious, and I have the hard copy of it somewhere, but I couldn't find it, so instead I have the sequel, which is My Name is Mina, and follows a different character from Skellig. This one's actually signed, which is nice. But anyway, Skellig begins. I found him in the garage on a Sunday afternoon. It was the day after we moved into Falconer Road. The winter was ending. Mum had said we'd be moving just in time for the spring. Nobody else was there, just me. The others were inside the house with Dr. Death, worrying about the baby. He was lying there in the darkness behind the tea chests, in the dust and dirt. It was as if he'd been there forever. He was filthy and pale and dried out, and I thought he was dead. I couldn't have been more wrong. Number 8, another one I couldn't find my hard copy of. It is Millions by Frank Cottrell Boyce. This author tends to write very kind of family-orientated ones, like there's always an issue within the family and they can be quite heartbreaking, but the method of telling is always quite, I don't know, engaging and entertaining and uplifting. So I recommend Frank Cottrell Boyce. Millions has also been made into a film, and it's a really unique idea, as are many of his books. If our Anthony was telling this story, he'd start with the money. It always comes down to money, he says, so you might as well start there. He'd probably put, once upon a time there were 229,370 little pounds sterling, and go on till he got to, and they all lived happily ever after in a high-interest bank account. But he's not telling this story. I am. Personally, I like to start with the patron saint of whatever it is. And this is about a character who's a very young boy who's obsessed with patron saints. He knows the patron saints of everything. And why? I seem to remember it's because his mum passed away. And obviously he was too young to lose her, and that's one of his quirks. And already this book has introduced that quirk. Number 7 is Moby Dick by Herman Melville, a book I've been really wanting to read ever since I watched the film version of Matilda. And at the end of that video she starts reading Moby Dick, and the opening line is one of the most famous, but I think the whole opening page is wonderful, although I won't read you the whole thing. Call me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. This one speaks to me. I have kind of a background with boats and sailing and travelling on boats, so this one speaks to me. Number 6 is the BookTube darling that is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I have not read this one either, although I've owned it for ages. I will read it, there just always seems to be something easier, less likely to emotionally cripple me on my TBR, so it gets pushed to the back a little bit, but I will read it. The opening is this, as if you don't know. Late in the winter of my 17th year, my mother decided I was depressed. presumably because I rarely left the house, spent quite a lot of time in bed, read the same book over and over, ate infrequently, and devoted quite a bit of my abundant free time to thinking about death. My number 5 is a very personal choice, and I have mentioned it here before. It is Lucas by Kevin Brooks. I love this book, it affected me a lot, it stayed with me, and whenever I think of it now, it kind of has this glowy aura to it. But I think it's kind of a retrospective favourite beginning, because I doubt when I first read the beginning that I was particularly struck by it. It's just that now that I know what that beginning leads me to, I love it. And it begins, I first saw Lucas on a fine afternoon at the end of July last summer. Of course, I didn't know who he was then. In fact, come to think of it, I didn't know what he was. All I could see from the back seat of the car was a green-clad creature padding along the stand in a shimmering haze of heat. A slight and ragged figure with a mop of straw blonde hair and a way of walking, I smile when I think of it, a way of walking that whispered secrets to the air. Number 4, we're on the home stretch, and it's a good thing because my light keeps changing. I've chosen a book that needs no introduction. It is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. It has one of the most famous opening lines ever, but I think the whole first page is perfection, if I can find it. All children except one grow up. They soon know that they will grow up, and the way Wendy knew was this. One day when she was 2 years old, she was playing in a garden, and she plucked another flower and ran with it to her mother. I suppose she must have looked rather delightful, for Mrs. Darling put her hand to her heart and cried, "Oh, why can't you remain like this forever?" This was all that passed between them on the subject, but henceforth Wendy knew that she must grow up. You always know after you are 2. 2 is the beginning of the end. Number 3, I couldn't not include everyone's favourite boy wizard in my top 10. This is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. I can't find my English one, so this is my Japanese one. I think for pure, warm, affectionate, transportative nostalgia, Harry Potter can't be beaten. Every time I reread it, I remember the first time I read it, and I'm sure it's the same for most of you. And this is the first line in Japanese, because you don't need me to read the English even if I had it right now. プレベツ通り4番地の住人ダーズリー夫妻はおかげさまで私どもはどこから見てもまともな人間ですというのが自慢だった。I forgot to say I really love how tart and English the opening for the Philosopher's Stone is. I think it really sets the tone well for the Dursleys. Only 2 more left, we're nearly there. I have Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is one of my favourite books, period, but it's also one of the best openings I've ever read. I think Jane Austen was so quick to establish character, and this is a prime example. So, say it with me, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighbourhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters. "My dear Mr. Bennet," said his lady to him one day, "have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?" We have arrived at number 1, and I always knew this was going to be my number 1 because for me, the opening for this is edibly good. The words are delicious. It reminds me of an interview I saw with J.K. Rowling where she talked about a book called The Little White Horse by Elizabeth Goode, or Googe, and she just said how she felt like she was at the picnics in that book because the descriptions of the sandwiches were so vivid, and I don't feel like I'm at the picnic, but I feel like I'm in the Enchanted Forest with this book, which is The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. It's kind of a cult classic. There's a quite dated animation that you may have seen and which I also love, but I think this book is so beautiful, and I know I don't have the best audiobook voice and you've been listening to me for ages already, but bear with me because this one's worth it. The unicorn lived in a lilac wood, and she lived all alone. She was very old, though she did not know it, and she was no longer the careless colour of sea foam, but rather the colour of snow falling on a moonlit night. But her eyes were still clear and unwearied, and she still moved like a shadow on the sea. She did not look anything like a horned horse, as unicorns are often pictured, being smaller and cloven-hoofed and possessing that oldest, wildest grace that horses have never had, that deer have only in shy, thin imitation, and goats in dancing mockery. Her neck was long and slender, making her head seem smaller than it was, and the mane that fell almost to the middle of her back was as soft as dandelion fluff and as fine as cirrus. She had pointed ears and thin legs, with feathers of white hair at the ankles, and the long horn above her eyes shone and shivered with its own seashell light, even in the deepest midnight. She had killed dragons with it and healed a king whose poisoned wound would not close, and knocked down ripe chestnuts for bear cubs. You are a worthy number one. So that's it, my top 10 best beginnings. I'm really pleased with all the choices I made, although there are 3 honourable mentions which I'll put at the end of this video because I'm sure you've had enough of hearing me drone on and on. If you disagreed with any of my choices, if you would have changed any of them, if there were some titles you expected to see but didn't, please let me know in the comments below. Obviously it's a very personal choice, but I'd like to hear what your choices would be. Thank you very much for watching this video. I will see you hopefully in the next one. Bye!